Hello, this is Rabble Radio, recorded on Friday, April 24th, 2026. I'm your host, Breanne Doyle. Rabble.ca shares the news of the day through a progressive lens. If you're curious about what's happening in Canadian politics, labor, the environment, and beyond, you've come to the right place. This is news for the rest of us. Thanks for tuning in. This week, in honor of Earth Day, we're sharing something a little different on Rabble Radio, a series of soundscapes, taking you across the world, visiting Rabble staff and friends, old and new, in nature. As the National Director of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, Sandra Schwartz, recently shared on the Courage My Friends podcast series, there is good evidence to show that time in nature reduces stress. It creates a sense of community. It creates a sense of wanting to protect what's around you, too. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and that it encourages you to get out and appreciate the nature surrounding you. Not just this Earth Week, but all year long. Take a listen.
My name is Nick Seebruch. I'm the editor of rabble.ca. I'm at the Cooper Marsh Conservation Area. Located on the shores of the St. Lawrence River, in the township of South Glengarry, just a little bit west of the village of Lancaster, the Cooper Marsh Conservation Area is home to more than 650 observed species, including at-risk species like the black ash tree and the snapping turtle. It's also home to many different varieties of birds, like the great heron, the American bittern, and the osprey. And of course, as you heard, many frog species, like the leopard frog, which is currently singing its chorus during its annual mating rituals. Wetlands filter our water. They preserve biodiversity, and they store massive amounts of carbon emissions, making them crucial in the fight against climate change. On Earth Day, places like Cooper Marsh remind me of the importance of preserving nature areas like this, not just for future generations, but today, to help continue the fight against the climate crisis.
Hi, Rabble Radio. I'm Stephen Wentzell, a former national politics reporter at rabble.ca. Now I live in Brooklyn, New York, where I work as an associate producer. I love the hustle and bustle of the city, but I try to spend at least an hour each day exploring Prospect Park. Prospect Park is over 500 acres. It's the second largest park in Brooklyn and is home to the last upland forest in the borough. The park is always full of people running or biking or roller skating, walking their dogs, fishing in the lake, barbecuing with loved ones, taking photos, and throwing a frisbee, kicking a soccer ball, or playing chess. Right now, the cherry blossoms are growing, and a couple is having their wedding photos taken beneath the trees. By the lake, people are feeding the geese. Prospect Park is full of gentle reminders of how important green spaces are, especially in a city as sprawling as this one.
Hi everyone, this is Breanne Doyle, the host of Rabble Radio and podcast producer here at Rabble. Unlike the majority of my Rabble peers, I live in British Columbia, North Vancouver to be exact, and today I went down to Deep Cove with my dog. Deep Cove is just about a 15-minute drive from my house, but once you're here, it feels much, much further away. It feels special and kind of otherworldly in its beauty. At least to me it does. You're not here with me, so let me paint you a picture. It's about 5 p.m. and people are off work. There are couples here, groups of friends gathering, small families. And even though it's a bit cloudy now, people seem excited about the warm weather we've been having and spirits are high. To my right, a little kid is arguing with his parents about putting a coat on. To my left, under a large willow tree, someone has left a small bouquet of daffodils, I'm assuming in memory of someone. And out in front of me are beautiful gray mountains on top of the icy water of the cove. I can see about 3 different kinds of birds, but listening to them sounds like there are many more that I can't see. Are you good with birds? What's this one called? Down here on the rocky sand, this seems like about as good as any spot to sit down and listen for a while. The peaceful lapping of the waves as they rock back and forth from the shore. My dog seems like she's had her fill of the cool breeze. Better get home. Thanks for listening and sitting with me for a little while.
Hi everyone, this is Gabriela Calugay-Casuga. I'm a labor reporter here at rabble.ca. One of my favorite spots, being born and raised in Ottawa, is probably the Mer Bleu wetlands. This area is a 3,500 hectare conservation area that is made up of 3 wetlands, specifically bogs, shrub swamps, and marsh. My favorite part of this area is probably the boardwalk through the marsh. It is one of the easiest, most accessible trails around the Ottawa area and makes for a very lovely walk in the spring, summer, and even in the winter, early winter when it's open. The Mer Bleu Conservation Area is managed by the National Capital Commission, NCC, which is the Crown Corporation that takes care of development, urban planning, and conservation here in the Ottawa area and the Capital Region. Something I learned recently about this bog and all the other kinds of wetlands, which I'll be honest, I cannot tell the difference between, is that this has actually been designated as an internationally significant wetland under the Ramsar Convention. The Ramsar Convention's mission is the conservation and wise use of all wetlands through local, national, and international cooperation as a contribution towards achieving sustainable development throughout the world. Their website actually says that wetlands are among the most diverse and productive ecosystems that are really important for supplying our fresh water. However, they continue to be repurposed and degraded in the name of development. Despite growing up nearby and coming here often to walk the trails, I actually had no idea how important the wetlands here at Mer Bleu were. And coming here again with the eyes of a journalist and revisiting these trails has really helped me gain a new appreciation for this region. And if anyone's in the area, I definitely recommend taking a walk through these trails.
Hi Rabble Radio, this is Karishma Joshi, recording from Berlin. One thing that I've noticed about Berlin is how easy it is to move through the city and make plant-based choices without really having to think too hard about it. Of course, when vegan food is everywhere like it's here, it stops feeling like the specialized need that I have. Plant-based choices are a normalized conversation among people here by design. Now, I'm not fully vegan, but being here has definitely made me more aware of how much access shapes what people eat. In a place that's often described as one of the vegan capitals of the world, what's consumed is a huge part of a bigger collective conversation about reducing carbon footprint. For Earth Day, that feels worth sitting with. By design, here there is no pressure to be plant-based. Instead, it's a way of keeping the possibility in front of people. The part that stays with me is the conscious everyday choices made by millions here, creating shifts in the way people think about climate-friendly choices. Thank you for listening.
Hello, it's Sarah Sahagian, the publisher of rabble.ca. I went for a walk on Cherry Street today, and you are hearing the audio of that adventure. I was walking from my home to run an errand. I got to pass the local YMCA. I got to see a bunch of condo towers, some construction, a streetcar. But another thing that I'm very lucky to get to see when I walk anywhere is tons of trees. I live in a part of Toronto, it's a neighborhood called Corktown, that has a lot of trees on the streets. It's a wonderful aspect of urban planning, and it means that even though you see the normal Toronto sights, you see traffic, you see people building a new tower, you see all of that, you still oftentimes get to hear the birds chirping, and you get to see beautiful greenery. It's lovely. I hope wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's an urban center or it's a more rural area, that wherever you go, you also get to see lovely trees while you're running errands or recording a podcast segment.
My name is Bridget Potasky, and I'm the former Jack Layton Journalism for Change Fellow with Rabble. As you could tell, it's currently raining in Toronto, and if you're based in Toronto, like myself, it feels that these days we're being constantly overwhelmed with rain every single day. Instead of begrudging it, I've decided to embrace it by going on walks when it's drizzling out. For myself, the sound of rain can serve as a calming white noise that symbolizes a pause in activity with the streets emptier and the feeling that you could have a break from your daily obligations. More so than that, rain isn't just nice to have. It's also one of the most important parts of a healthy environment. It nourishes crops and provides plants the moisture they need for photosynthesis. It helps provide food for animals and ourselves and is key to a healthy ecosystem. Maybe we could look at rain as being all about balance, whether that be between chaos and calm or stability and growth. That balance is key to sustaining us all.
Hi there, I'm Bryan Carney. I manage technical systems for Rabble and a few other independent publications. Like many people who grew up in southern Ontario, accessing nature sometimes meant piling into a car and fighting traffic to one of the areas we call up north. For me, that was at the base of Georgian Bay, where relatives had a cottage opposite Blue Mountain. I'm here for the first time in a long time, having lived in Vancouver for a decade. And what's most striking to me now, as it was when I was a kid, is the shale rock face. These dark, chalkboard-like, thin, compressed layers of rock in all of the shoreline and under the water crunch as you walk on them and can snap into the size you like with a finger's strength. The flat discs of a single layer can make unrivaled skipping rocks on a calm morning like this.
We hope you enjoyed that journey around the globe and in nature with us. If you'd like to listen to the Courage My Friends podcast episode referenced at the top of this episode, featuring Sandra Schwartz from the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, visit Rabble Radio's sister podcast, Needs No Introduction, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and rabble.ca. And now, this is our In Case You Missed It segment, where we review the top stories from this week on rabble.ca. To do that, let's hand things over to Rabble editor Nick Seebruch. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Breanne. Starting this week with national news. New NDP leader Avi Lewis is remaining tight-lipped on how and when he plans to win a seat in the House of Commons. Lewis previously run for the NDP in a Vancouver riding in the past 2 elections, but was unsuccessful both times. There is speculation that Lewis could choose to run instead in a by-election in Toronto for the Beaches East York riding that is expected to be vacated by Liberal Nate Erskine-Smith. Recent polls have Lewis polling at a strong second place in that riding, just behind former Toronto Mayor John Tory, who could run for the Liberals. In an interview with Rabble, however, Lewis said that his focus is being on the road across the country and building the party from the outside of the House of Commons. When Jack Layton became leader of the NDP more than 20 years ago, he also did not have a seat in the House of Commons, and waited for the general election before running for one. At least for the time being, it seems that Lewis will be doing the same thing. In feminist news this week, Rabble founder Judy Rebick writes that as she has gotten older, her feminism has grown to include listening and collaborating with others. She points to Nancy Wilson, president of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, as a good example of a woman who leads by making others feel heard. Rebick says that she feels like the ability to listen and discuss and accept differences of opinion is something that has been lost on the left in recent years. Writing, quote, "I think our inability to listen to each other when we have differences has been a major weakness of the left for generations, and it's getting worse. In my generation, we'd say, I am right and you are wrong. Today it is, I am right and you are a bad person. In my generation, we would unite across differences even if we fought constantly. In this generation, people seem to think that they have to work only with people they agree with." End quote. In provincial news, the United Conservative Party in Alberta is going ahead with a plan to reject an electoral redistricting map that was created by an impartial provincial electoral commission. The map would give 2 more seats in Alberta's cities, while removing seats from rural areas. The United Conservative Party receives more support from rural areas, while urban centres tend to skew towards the NDP. Instead of using the electoral map created by the impartial commission, Danielle Smith and the United Conservative Party want to redraw a new one based on recommendations of a committee composed primarily of United Conservative representatives. This is the first time in history that the government has rejected a redistricting map created by an impartial commission. Also this week, Rabble columnist Charlotte Sheesby argues that children who have experienced abuse at the hands of their parents should be able to sue those parents for damages. While there is not currently any legislation that would specifically allow a child to sue their parent for damages for abuse, there are some legal precedents that exist that could make it possible. One avenue through which someone could sue another person is if they allege that that person has failed to provide a certain standard of care. Cheeseby argues that abuse certainly does not meet a minimum standard of care. The ability to sue is particularly relevant for transgender children, Cheeseby says, because statistics show that these children are more likely to experience abuse at the hands of their parents, whether that be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. In world news this week, columnist Linda McQuaig says that Mark Carney could learn a thing or two from Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on how to stand up to Donald Trump. For all of his talk about elbows up, it is Carney's Spanish counterpart who has taken real steps to push back against Trump. After Trump attacked Iran, Sanchez banned the U.S. from using any Spanish military bases and enacted a total arms embargo on Israel. As a contrast, Mark Carney initially expressed support for Trump's war against Iran and even would not exclude the possibility of Canada's military getting involved at some level at some point during the conflict. McQuaig writes, quote, "Spain has given us a glimpse of how to stand up against this. If only Canada could be similarly brave." End quote. And finally, from Rabble's Book Lounge, Tom Sanborn reviews The East End Rules, Growing Up Radical in Vancouver's East End by Norman Narwaki. East End Rules is a work of semi-autobiographical fiction that depicts life growing up in Vancouver's rough East End neighborhood from the 1950s through to the 1970s. Narwaki's story follows a young man named Joey as he grows up in an environment stricken by poverty and crime, and how these experiences shape his later life as a community organizer and activist. This tale mirrors Narwaki's own experiences growing up in the East End neighborhood, and, like Joey, Narwaki went on to be formed by these experiences and pushed to pursue a life fighting against social injustice. And as always, you can read the full versions of all the stories we talked about today on rabble.ca.
Thanks, Nick, and that's it for Rabble Radio this week. To help support our show, please visit rabble.ca/donate, subscribe to Rabble Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and now join us over on Patreon for special bonus content. Thank you to all the journalists and writers who contributed to this week's content on rabble.ca. Thank you to Carl Narenberg for supplying the music, and thank you to you for tuning in to Rabble Radio. I'm Breanne Doyle, and we'll talk to you next week.